Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Luna's return to Los Angeles didn't come with enchantresses or festivity. There was no dramatic advertisement, no press leak, no warning. One day she was gone, presumed dead, spoken about in hushed tones and heavy silences, and the coming she was standing just outside the megacity she formerly ran from, watching familiar thoroughfares with eyes that had seemed too important for someone her age. The question that followed her like a shadow was simple but dangerous: was Luna a fabricator who orchestrated her own exposure, or a victim of forces far bigger than anyone ever knew? For months, the people she left before had mourned her in different ways. Some with guilt, some with wrathfulness, some with relief they'd no way admit out loud. And some, like Finn, with a crack that no way healed because it was no way allowed to. Finn had lived with the belief that Luna's death was his failure, that he'd missed commodity, ignored a sign, trusted the wrong people. Her absence had still reshaped him, made him conservative, distant, less willing to believe that the verity would always reveal itself in time. So when whispers started circulating that Luna might be alive, they felt cruel, nearly obnoxious, like continuing a grave just to check if the pain was still there. But the whispers didn't fade. They grew louder. A sanitarium record that didn't relatively match. A body that had no way been conclusively linked. A croaker who avoided questions. And sluggishly, the insolvable idea came: necessary Luna might have survived. And if she did, someone had helped her vanish. That someone, as it turned out, was Li Li's involvement wasn't revealed all at formerly. It came out in fractions, the way verity frequently does in this family. Through pressure, battle, and cracks that could no longer be sealed. Li had claimed she was guarding Luna, saving her from retribution, from legal consequences, from people who wanted answers she wasn't ready to give. But protection has a way of blurring into control, and watch into manipulation, and the line Li crossed would hang her. Luna hadn't been unconscious or helpless when she dissolved. She had been spooked, injured, and induced that fading was the only way to survive. The world believed she was dead because Li made sure it did. And Luna let it be. That's where the mistrustfulness crept by. Because victims don't generally help write their own citations. When Luna eventually stepped back into the lives she'd abandoned, she wasn't the same girl who left. She carried herself else, spoke less, watched more. There was guilt in her eyes, but also resolve. She didn't supplicate for remission. She didn't demand understanding. She simply told her story, not all of it, not at first, and let people decide what to believe. She admitted she'd allowed the taradiddle to grow because she'd been hysterical that the verity would destroy further lives than the taradiddle ever could. She had believed that staying gone was an act of mercy. For Finn, that explanation landed like a punch. Because while Luna was trying to survive, he'd been grieving her, questioning every choice he'd ever made where she was concerned. He didn't know whether to hold her or walk down. Seeing her alive felt like a phenomenon twisted into commodity, painful and illegal. And Steffi, who had watched Finn unravel still, didn't trust Luna's return at all. To Steffi, Luna's survival raised one intimidating possibility: that Luna had manipulated everyone, that she played dead to escape consequences, and now wanted to demeet their lives on her own terms. Steffi wasn't willing to let that be without answers. Brooke, meanwhile, saw Luna through a different lens. As someone youthful, damaged, and caught in a web spun by grown-ups who should have known better. Brooke honored that kind of damage, the kind that teaches you that survival occasionally looks like deception. Ridge was torn, as usual, between sense and empathy, between guarding his family and admitting that Luna's exposure had no way added up. The family divided snappily, not over whether Luna was alive, but over what her survival meant. Was she stalwart or dastardly? Smart or selfish? Victim or villain? And Luna herself didn't help by refusing to completely explain everything. She held back details about the night she dissolved, about who hovered her, about what Li had really promised her. That silence made people suspicious. Because silence in this family frequently hides guilt. As pressure mounted, Luna began to crack. Not dramatically, not with screaming or gashes, but in quiet moments when she realized she couldn't undo the damage she'd caused. She saw the wrathfulness in Finn's restraint, the fear in Steffi's vigilant eyes, the disappointment in people who had defended her only to feel foolish now. Luna hadn't come back to reclaim her old life. She came back because running had stopped working, because the taradiddle had grown heavier than the Verity, and because part of her hoped that if she faced what she'd done, she might eventually stop feeling like a ghost. The most ruinous disclosure came when Luna admitted that part of her exposure wasn't just about fear, it was about shame. She had made choices she didn't know how to enjoy, and fading felt easier than standing still while everyone judged her. That admission shifted everything. It didn't vindicate her, but it humanized her. Indeed, Steffi, reticent as she was, had to admit that Luna didn't look like someone conniving vengeance or manipulation. She looked like someone exhausted by survival. Lee, on the other hand, looked like someone who had induced herself that controlling the narrative was the same as guarding the person. Her turn down to take full responsibility only strengthened the rift between her and Finn, who realized too late that the woman he trusted with life and death opinions had decided Luna's fate without his concurrence. Luna's return didn't restore balance, it shattered it. Old injuries restarted, new alliances formed. And the Verity, when it eventually surfaced fully, was messier than anyone wanted. Luna hadn't been purely a victim, but she was an architect moreover. She was a youthful woman possessed by fear, told by authority, and trapped by a taradiddle that grew too big to escape. Whether Los Angeles would forgive her remained uncertain. Whether Finn could ever look at her without flashing back the months he believed she was dead was unclear. What was certain was that Luna's return changed everything. Because in this world, survival isn't always heroic, Verity isn't always clean, and occasionally the line between fabricator and victim is so thin that crossing it feels like the only way to stay alive. After Luna's reappearance stopped being a scuttlebutt and came a living, breathing reality, the air around the Forrester and Spencer circles changed in subtle but unmistakable ways. Exchanges grew guarded. People measured their words again, the way they always did when commodity dangerous floated just beneath the face. Luna's presence alone was enough to renew injuries people had sutured closed too snappily, injuries that no way healed duly because they were buried under hypotheticals rather of verity. She didn't storm back into anyone's life demanding remission or averring she be understood. Rather, she floated on the edges, watching responses, absorbing judgment, still bracing herself for the ineluctable reckoning. Because deep down Luna knew returning wasn't the hardest part. Staying was. Facing the living consequences of a taradiddle was far more intimidating than fading into silence ever had been. Finn plotted the most with the emotional whiplash. He'd rebuilt himself around Luna's absence, reshaping his sense of responsibility, grief and guilt into commodity manageable. He'd told himself over and over that there was nothing more he could have done, that occasionally tragedy arrived without explanation. Now that explanation stood in front of him, breathing, watching him with eyes that searched his face for commodity she didn't know how to ask for. Finn didn't know where to put the wrathfulness. Part of him wanted to yell, demand to know how she could let him mourn her, let him believe he failed her. But another part of him saw the fragility beneath her countenance, honored the signs of someone who had lived in survival mode for too long. That internal conflict drained him. He came distant, quieter at home, lost in studies he couldn't partake with Steffi without sounding cruel or perfidious. Steffi, meanwhile, refused to soften. She saw Luna's return not as a phenomenon, but as a destabilizing force. Steffi had spent months helping Finn heal, watching him question himself in ways that spooked her. To Steffi, Luna represented not just emotional chaos, but a trouble to the stability she had fought so hard to cover. She didn't charge Luna openly, but her dubitation was clear in every commerce. She asked questions others avoided. She pressed for timelines, motives, details that Luna plotted to give. And each vacillation, each vague explanation, only hardened Steffi's resoluteness. Because Steffi believed one thing over all: additional people do'nt fake their own deaths without a reason, and that reason is infrequently innocent. Brooke set up herself caught in a familiar part, trying to see the humanity where others saw only treason. She honored Luna's fear because she had formerly been youthful and overwhelmed too, trapped in situations where every choice felt wrong, and every exit came with consequences. Brooke didn't excuse Luna's conduct, but she questioned the terrain that made fading feel like the only option. She wondered how numerous grown-ups had failed Luna before Luna ever failed herself. Rich heeded but remained conservative. Experience had tutored him that compassion without responsibility only delayed the fallout. He believed Luna merited a chance to tell the whole verity, but he also knew that half-truths were frequently more dangerous than falsehoods. As days passed, fractions of Luna's retired life began to surface. Not through dramatic admissions but through small, uncomfortable discoveries. Fiscal records that showed she'd lived under an assumed identity. Medical movables made under false names. A quiet city where no bone asked questions, where she'd worked simple jobs and kept her head down. It came clear that Luna hadn't been living sumptuously or colluding. She'd been surviving. But survival didn't abolish responsibility. The further people learned, the more complicated their passions came. She wasn't the villain some had imagined, but she wasn't impeccable moreover. And that Argentine area unsettled everyone. The biggest fracture came when Lee's part was examined more nearly. Originally, Lee framed her conduct as a necessary wrong, a medical decision driven by urgency and fear. She claimed Luna was unstable, vulnerable, in peril of harming herself or being harmed by others. But under scrutiny, Lee's defense unraveled. She hadn't simply helped Luna vanish. She had orchestrated it, controlled information, falsified records, and shut down anyone who questioned the narrative. For Finn, that consummation was ruinous. Lee wasn't just a croaker who crossed ethical lines. She was family, someone he trusted implicitly. The treason cut deeper than Luna's exposure ever had. Because Luna was youthful and spooked, Lee was neither. Luna felt that shift too. She had formerly cleaved to Lee as a lifeline, someone aged, authoritative, persuading her that fading was an act of protection. Now she saw the cost of that decision easily. She watched Finn defy Lee with unbelief and heartache, and guilt washed over her in swells. She hadn't just faded from Finn's life. She had been the catalyst for a rupture that might no way completely heal. And for the first time, Luna questioned whether she had been defended or used. Whether Lee had saved her, or simply decided her fate without giving her a real choice. Public perception came another handicap Luna hadn't anticipated. Indeed, without sanctioned evidence, whispers spread. People talked. They always did. Stories shifted with every retelling. Some painted Luna as a manipulator who played everyone. Others cast her as a woeful figure who slightly escaped disaster. The verity sat nearly in between, but verity infrequently traveled as presto as judgment. Luna felt exposed, scanned, stripped of the obscurity she had reckoned on for so long. She began to withdraw again, not physically this time but emotionally. She stopped explaining herself, stopped trying to be understood, because every attempt sounded to make effects worse. Finn noticed. He saw the way Luna squinched at raised voices, the way she braced herself before answering questions, the way she apologized reflexively indeed when she'd done nothing wrong. Those details minced down at his wrathfulness. He didn't forgive her. Not yet, but he started to understand the interpretation of Luna that had made the decision to vanish. And that understanding frightened him further than rage ever could. Because it meant accepting that the world had failed her in ways he hadn't wanted to admit. Steffi, seeing Finn's internal shift, grew more guarded. She bothered that empathy would turn into defense, that Luna's pain would overshadow the detriment she caused. Steffi wasn't cruel, but she was realistic. She believed that intentions didn't negate consequences. And she stressed that letting Luna remain in their route would keep continuing injuries Finn demanded to close. The pressure between guarding Finn and esteeming his emotional autonomy created strain in their marriage, subtle but patient. They dissented not in arguments but in silences, in effects left unsaid. The turning point came when Luna eventually told the full verity about the night she dissolved. Not all at formerly, and not dramatically, but steadily, as if laying down a burden she could no longer carry. She admitted she hadn't just been hysterical for her safety. She had been scarified of facing what she'd done, of retaining miscalculations that could alter lives permanently. She confessed that fading felt like pressing pause on judgment, on consequences, on herself. She hadn't realized that time doesn't stop just because someone leaves. Life had gone on without her, and now she had to meet a world that had formerly mourned her. That admission didn't fix anything, but it changed the discussion. It shifted Luna from a riddle to a person again. Someone bloodied, spooked, and deeply mortal. Indeed, Steffi, hearkening still, honored the honesty in Luna's voice. It didn't abolish Steffi's enterprises, but it complicated them. And in this family, complications were dangerous because they forced people to defy uncomfortable trueness about themselves. Lee, faced with mounting pressure and inarguable substantiation, retreated emotionally. She justified her conduct, doubled down, refused to admit the detriment she caused. That turndown insulated her. Finn could entertain the woman he knew with the one revealed through Luna's story. Their relationship fractured under the weight of implied resentment. And Luna, formerly reliant on Lee's guidance, now reseated herself, realizing too late that surrendering control of her story had brought her further than she ever imagined. As weeks passed, the question of who Luna was now came necessary. She couldn't return to who she had been ahead. That interpretation of herself was gone, buried alongside the taradiddle of her death. The challenge wasn't redemption, it was reinvention. Could she live actually in a world that formerly believed the worst of her? Could she accept responsibility without being consumed by shame? And most importantly, could the people she hurt ever see her as further than the girl who faded? Finn remained at the center of that query. His passions were undetermined, messy and exhausting. He watched about Luna's well-being, but trust didn't regenerate overnight. Some days he felt defensive. Other days he felt resentful. Both feelings spooked him. Because love, formerly fractured, didn't return in neat pieces. It came back jagged, changeable, able of cutting everyone involved. Luna understood that. She didn't ask Finn for anything. Not remission. Not closeness. Not indeed understanding. She simply stayed. She showed up. She faced the aesthetics, the silence, the questions. She accepted that some people might no way forgive her, and that some connections were permanently altered. And for the first time since fading, she stopped running. Whether Luna would eventually be flashed back as a fabricator or a victim remained uncertain. The verity was she was both, and neither marker completely captured the reality of what she survived. In a world where secrets are currency and survival frequently demands insolvable choices, Luna's story wasn't about innocence or guilt. It was about the cost of fear, the damage of silence, and the brutal reality that occasionally, staying alive means making choices you'll spend the rest of your life answering for. And as Los Angeles continued to watch, judge, and presume, one thing came clear: Luna's return wasn't the end of the story. It was only the morning of the reckoning. The reckoning didn't arrive all at formerly. It unfolded still, in the pauses between exchanges and the looks people changed when Luna entered a room. She felt it far and wide, the weight of being seen but not truly ate, conceded but not embraced. Indeed, when no bone said anything, their restraint spoke volumes. Luna learned snappily that surviving a taradiddle was different from surviving the verity. The taradiddle had been lonely, but predictable. The verity was exposed, unpredictable, and insolvable to control. Each day demanded a new kind of strength, one she wasn't sure she had yet. What surprised Luna most was how important she wanted to stay. Indeed, when leaving would have been easier. There were moments when she considered fading again, slipping out before further damage could be done. But she understood now that running wouldn't cover anyone, it would only confirm everyone's worst hypotheticals. So she stayed, embedded in discomfort, learning to live with consequences rather of escaping them. Finn watched this quiet perseverance with equivocal feelings. He noticed the trouble Luna made to take responsibility without dramatizing it, to accept distance without resentment. It didn't abolish his pain, but it challenged the narrative he'd erected around her. He'd formerly believed her exposure was evidence of abandonment. Now he saw it as a fracture born of fear, not malignancy. That consummation didn't heal him, but it softened commodity sharp inside him, commodity he hadn't realized was still cutting him open. Steffi too observed Luna more nearly. She saw the restraint, the lack of manipulation, the absence of annuity. Luna didn't demand trust or sympathy. She earned small moments of it through thickness. Steffi still believed alert was necessary, but certainty began to crack. Because true deceivers don't sit with discomfort, they control it. And Luna wasn't controlling anything. She was enduring. The family as a whole shifted into a conservative equilibrium. No affirmations of remission were made. No forgiveness was granted. But the explosive pressure eased into commodity quieter and more manageable. Responsibility replaced blameworthiness. Reflection replaced response. And sluggishly, the question of who Luna had been gave way to who she was getting. Luna didn't know what her future in Los Angeles would look like. She didn't anticipate restoration or redemption. She hoped only for the chance to live actually without secrets or murk. She accepted that some islands were burned ever. But others she believed might still be rebuilt not to what they were but to commodity new, commodity honest. In the end, Luna realized that survival wasn't the triumph she formerly allowed. It was. Survival was simply the morning. Living meant staying, answering hard questions, and facing people she had hurt without awaiting remission in return. Whether the world would ever stop questioning her motives remained uncertain. But for the first time, Luna wasn't defined by fear or exposure. She was defined by presence. And in a place where running had always been easier than standing still, that choice signified further than anything differently.